Howdy YouTube, Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. Today we're gonna do a video on Linux versus Windows. Is basically the best way I can put it. I had a lot of subscribers and well, people that watched the video were kind of disappointed that I have decided to not move to Linux at this point. Now that doesn't mean I'm not going to use Linux. It just means that Linux is not going to drive my desktop or my workstation. And, you know, I have some pretty simple needs. I need to be able to support my clients. I need to be able to run OBS. I need to be able to run Google Chrome. I need a stable video editing platform, which I have now found. And I need my file transfer speeds to be gigabit, because I have a gigabit network. But the problem is with Linux, time after time, and this has been an ongoing issue with me in Linux for years, is it just doesn't seem to have the same speed as Windows. And I'm talking Windows 7, Windows 10 versus any flavor of Linux. The best Linux I've had luck with is Linux Mint 18 and 19. They seem to get pretty consistent file transfer speeds. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. Part and parcel of that, along with some of my testing, as you know, I run a lot of my Linux desktops in a virtual machine using Oracle's VM Virtualbox. And you're going to find the other thing I discovered is that in addition to abysmal file transfer speeds on Linux, when you add a hypervisor on top of that, and when you run a Linux or a Windows machine for that matter in VM Virtualbox, it cuts your network transfer speeds by 2/3. Yeah, you heard me right. I go from 100 megabyte per second transfer speeds on Windows on a physical hardware to about 30 megabytes per second in a Oracle VM Virtualbox machine. So I decided that something needed to be done. I needed my test results to be on the physical layer. The other problem I was having is I was running some of these tests on older hardware, like a Core 2 Duo CPU. For example, these units down here on the floor, right here, those are all Core 2 Duos or derivations of that, with 2 to 4 gig of RAM. Not a good test. The unit behind me now, let me grab the microphone. As you can see, the big black box there, that used to be my domain controller, that has an i5 Core i5 quad-core processor, and it has 16 gig of RAM in it, and it has a Qualcomm built-in network card. It's a gigabyte motherboard. It's a good unit. So what I did was I put Windows 10 on there, and then I put Linux Mint 19 on there, and that's going to be our test bed for this video today. But let me show you the results, the first results I got with virtual machines running under VirtualBox, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Alright, so let's start with a virtual machine. We'll do a couple of these and show you the results in both of them. So this is Manjaro Linux, because somebody told me it was it's actually Manjaro KDE in a virtual machine. I've given it 4 cores, 4 gig of RAM. It's got a virtual hard drive. It has a bridged networking adapter. I just want to make sure I'm being fair on these tests, so all the virtual machines will have the same physical resources attached to them. So once we get Manjaro up here, and why Manjaro brings up this shell, I have no idea, but it does. That was just my initial connection. It tells me there are some updates. I have done the updates, I just haven't done updates in the last few days. So basically what I'm going to do is copy a file from one of my Windows servers to this local machine to see what kind of speed results we get, and then I'm going to copy that file back to my Synology NAS and see what kind of transfer speeds we get both sending and receiving. So I'm just going to open a file manager. Now I should have created, I believe I created a shortcut here for the video. I did. So I'll just need to log in. Now this is my Windows machine, Windows share machine I am connecting to. And we'll go get some We'll just grab a couple of videos then. Alien. I hate this single click. I know you can turn it off, but I haven't modified it yet. So I'll copy these. I'll copy these 3 and I'll paste them here. So down here in the taskbar, if I click on that and I expand it, then you can see my transfer rate. So I'm currently copying from my Microsoft Windows Network server, running server 2016, copying a file to the virtual machine, and you can see my file transfer speeds are 38.2 megabits per second. And this is because I'm running in Oracle of a virtual connection, so I'm just monitoring my Ethernet connectivity on the Windows side of things. Okay, the copy is done. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want to connect up to, let's see, we do a Control L here, and I'm going to connect up to my NAS machine, which is my Synology, and we'll log in on that. And what I'm going to do is just use my Veeam backups folder, so I'm going to right click on that and choose they don't have a mount option under here. And this is the other thing that really annoys me about the different operating systems, the different flavors of Linux, is they're not consistent. So I should be able to add to places. There we go. And now I should be able to come into that. So now I'm going to create a folder on there called test. Alright. Now I'm going to come back up here to my videos folder, and I'm going to select all 3 of these, right click and copy, and then I'm going to go to my Veeam backups test folder, and I'm going to paste those 3 items there. So now I'm copying back from my machine onto the network. Bring Task Manager up here for Windows, and you can see we're still only getting 33 megabits per second. And you can see, if you monitor on the Windows side of things, you can see the internet or the network connection drops down to nothing and then jumps back up, and drops down to nothing and jumps up, and drops back down to nothing and jumps up. So as you can clearly see for yourself, copy speeds across the network are abysmal, even with Manjaro Linux, or Manjaro. I don't know why I want to call that Manjaro. So in my research, it seems I have stumbled on another problem that could further confound the issue as to why Linux doesn't have adequate or sufficient file transfer speeds across the network. I've spun up a Windows 10 virtual machine, Windows 10 Pro, using the Intel Pro network adapter under the virtual machine. The Virtualbox additions have been added, and as you can see, it is getting about 1/3 of my normal transfer speed. So while Linux on hardware, on a non-virtualized machine, gets about 60 to 70 megabytes per second, when you run it under Virtualbox, it cuts that speed in half, And it looks like when you run Windows under VirtualBox, you're cutting the speed by third. So I don't know if this is a known issue with VirtualBox, but I have heard people speak of the fact that VirtualBox is not probably your best solution for desktop virtualization, and I can see why. I mean, it really cuts the speed out of the Windows 10 network connection. I mean, that's abysmal transfer speeds. Why have I got a gigabit network if I can't achieve gigabit speeds in a virtual machine? Now, Hyper-V doesn't have this problem. If you run a Windows 10 machine in Hyper-V, you get the full transfer speed. So I don't know whether it's a matter of tinkering with the VirtualBox Ethernet adapter settings, but as you can see, it's not getting anywhere near the transfer speed that it should, even in a Windows virtual machine. So those are the abysmal speeds, as you see I got running these virtual machines in VirtualBox. So I guess VirtualBox is basically good for, you know, booting up a Linux or a Windows desktop and doing a little testing, but I would hate to run Windows in a virtual machine under VirtualBox and have that kind of performance impact. And now, granted, I haven't tried all the derivations of network cards available in VirtualBox to Windows. I just used the Windows 10 template that VirtualBox gives you, and I tweaked some of the processor settings and those kind of things, but you can see the transfer speeds, both in Windows and in Linux, were abysmal. So you already have the bad transfer speeds of Linux over an SMB network, and then you add another layer to it, a hypervisor, and you can see where it might have gone awry. Evidently, VirtualBox has a lot of overhead on the networking side. So now let's go over to this physical machine and see how much better it fared. Well, as they say on one of my favorite movies, proof is in the pudding. And the proof is that Windows is just faster out of the box in network transfers than Linux is. That's just the way it is. And when I say out of box, I mean a clean install of Windows 10 1803 with all the updates done versus a clean install of Linux Mint 19 with all the updates done, including the Linux kernel up to the current version. And you can see for yourself the file transfer speeds on Linux never got above 70 megabytes per second. However, the Windows 10 machine consistently had between 80 and 100 megabytes per second, and it was more often than not, it was 100 megabytes per second. I also tested between two different servers. I copied these files both to my Synology NAS and from my Windows production machine. And the speeds were a little bit slower on the a little bit faster on the Windows, copying to and from the Windows server than they were to the Synology NAS, but not by much. And it only dipped down to about 80 megabytes per second, and then the speeds came back up. I have a feeling that has to do with the way that Synology caches the writes on the hard drives on that unit, but don't quote me on that. So that is the main reason that I haven't switched to Linux on my desktop, because I just can't depend on it to be fast enough. Now, I've had person after person tell me, well, my Linux transfer speeds are 100 megabytes per second. Okay, well, that's great. Give me some specs. What motherboard are you running? What CPU are you running? How much memory? What network card do you have in there? And have you optimized any of the settings? Because we're talking about, I'm comparing Windows out of the box to Linux out of the box. If Linux is wanting to be on the desktop and is claiming to be a desktop operating system, it ought to run as fast as Windows 10 or Windows 7 for that matter. I didn't show the Windows 7 test, but trust me, they do 100 megabytes per second as well. The other thing I noticed is running Linux versus Windows, it uses about 10 more watts of power than Windows does. I don't know why that is either, but I showed you the footage of that on the power monitor thingy right there. So when it was running Windows, it was running between 80 and 90 watts, and when it was running Linux, it's 100 watts and above consistently, because I sat there and monitored it while the file copy was in progress. So I guess my challenge now is to the Linux community to prove me wrong. You can't just simply drop a comment on my channel and say, well, mine runs at 100 megabytes. I'd like to see some actual proof of that. And I'm not doubting people that tell me that, but it's been my experience that people maybe don't test it thoroughly, or a lot of Linux users may not even be aware of the slower file transfer speeds under Linux. So I'd love to be proven wrong. I'd love to learn what the problem is with Linux so I can fix it, because that might help me to better adopt Linux as my daily driver on a workstation. And my intent here is not to bash Linux. My intent here is to show you, to be truthful with you and show you what my experiences with Linux have been. And if people in the Linux community want to be offended by that, well, I can't control your feelings on the subject. I suggest that you do some testing of your own, draw your own conclusion, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I decided it was time to do an actual video showing the actual transfer speeds, and then let you guys be the judge of whether whether I'm crazy, which could be true. Probably not. My spouse tells me I'm crazy, but I don't believe it. The doctors say no. I've been tested. But anyway, test it on your own. Tell me what your results are. I'd love to hear people who put it on a machine. And now I will tell you this: the clock speed of the machine does have an effect, especially on Linux, with file transfer speeds. It impacts Windows a little bit. So the more cores you have, the better it runs, the faster it runs. So, and please test it for yourself and tell me what your results have been, and leave me some specs on your test bed, what you're testing it on. Leave them down below. My next one, I think, to test will be At some point we're going to do a FreeNAS video. We're going to look at FreeNAS again, probably on that box behind me, and put it through its paces and see what kind of file transfer speeds we get with FreeNAS, because if memory serves me correct, I may or may not have had the problem with FreeNAS long ago, but we'll revisit that. Howdy, my name is Netus Kledermeyer. I'm the shipping manager for Uncle Joe's Playhouse, and today somebody sent us some of these things. We're not quite sure if they're explosive devices or not. We're handling them with care. Now, evidently, somebody from Denmark, I believe his name is Morton, and he has sent us these devices. There's two in here. There appears to be two more here. They're not ticking. There's two there, and then there appears to be some more in here. Of course, they're taped securely, so let's see here. Anyway, there's two more in here. So what we're gonna do is my boss has told me to put these in a box and ship them to Morton in Denmark. Now, here's the problem. The only way I can ship these economically is via the U.S. Postal Service, which means they'll get there in about 10 years. So what I'm going to do, put them all in a box, and we're going to get them shipped off to Morton. And there appears, he said there should be 6 processors, and that appears to be what I have. So I'm going to put them in a box, and I'm going to ship them to Morton. Alright, they're boxed up, they're ready to go. I'm going to hand them over. We're going to send them via airmail. Ready? 1, 2, 3. They're on their way to you, Morton. I hope they get there in 6 pieces. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye. Well, there you go, YouTube. We hope you found the video entertaining and informative as always. Please come back and see us again. Give us a like down below. Leave your comments in the comments section. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Turn on that notification bell so you get notified of new videos. We take PayPal, we take Patreon if you're so inclined to donate. We are back on Twitter. I have updated the link in the comments section in the description down below of all my videos, and I've updated the Twitter link on the About screen. So if you're not already subscribed on Twitter, go follow us on Twitter. Don't forget, we will see you on the other side.